There's so many articles talking about the zodiac in relation to Jesus. They don't realize Jesus is the sun, a metaphor, S-U-N. And it's talking about his 12 apostles or his 12 followers, or the 12 signs of the zodiac. Jesus with his 12 apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 seasons. And this is why there are 3 months in each season. Christianity today is replete with saying that we are living in the last days. We're living in the end times. Of course we're living in the last days of Pisces, which means the next one coming is going to be the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer. Very important point here that proves what we're talking about as astrology. We are now facing the next 2,150 years when the sun will officially be in the constellation of Aquarius, the water bearer. And so in the New Testament, in the book of Luke 22, the apostles are asking Jesus, now that you're going to die, where are we going to go? We are your 12 followers, but where are we going to go? And so Jesus answers them in the book of Luke 22:10, where Jesus said unto them, behold, when you enter into the city, there shall a man meet you bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he enters in. It's the house of Aquarius. And Aquarius is the water bearer. But we know that this was talking about an astrological sign. Why? Because men never carried water ever. In the ancient world, that was something that a man would never do, is to carry water. That was a woman's job, period. So why did Jesus say, look for the man with the water pitcher? That's an astrological sign. The whole of the Bible, both Old and New Testament, is a metaphor, as a symbolic story that the theologians have known for hundreds of years. But nobody is telling the public. That's why I think it's important to bring this out, that people need to know there's nothing wrong with the zodiac. The Bible, both Old and New Testament, says God created it. So if you're calling down evil upon the zodiac as a work of the devil, that's not what the scriptures say at all. And like the scripture says in the Bible, when God said to his people, do not call down evil upon something I have cleansed. When I make something, don't you call it evil. Well, this is what I'm saying that we need to keep in mind today. When you talk about astrology and the zodiac, God made that according to the scriptures. So we see the man with the water pitcher is all over the world in Christian churches. But the Christians don't know that. They don't understand what these symbols mean. Now, as we begin the story of the sun and the ancient religions of the world and how much the sun has dominated civilization for as long as we have records, we need to go back to the very beginning. And that's a long time ago. Let's go back to Egypt. We'll start in Egypt because that's one of the oldest civilizations on the earth. And we will see how Egypt developed the concept of the importance of the sun in relation to theology and spirituality and religion. Now, this is an ancient symbol for the sun, prehistoric, that the ancient peoples drew to represent the sun. It's an equal arm cross within the circle. Here is a artifact that was found in England. It's unhinged. It's on a golden circle, which represents the sun. And then you'll see the cross in between. And this is about 4,500 years old. Almost 5,000 years ago, ancient mankind drew pictures of what they perceived the sun to be as an equal arm cross. And you will see it also in the ancient religions of the Near and Middle East. the different ancient gods in the Phoenician, Canaanite, Sumerian systems, they all had the equal arm cross. But it's important to remember that the sun was never perceived as a god. It was perceived to represent the spiritual qualities of God, in that it brought life to the earth, it brought warmth to the earth, it brought energy for us to live. So all of the good things about God and His creation was best represented by the symbol of the sun. Sometimes the sun actually even looks like it has an equal arm cross in the heavens. The reason why it's 4 equal arms on the cross is because there are 4 equal seasons of the year. We have north, east, west, and south, the 4 corners. Then each one of those 4 corners represents a season of the year: spring, summer, autumn, winter. This is why you have 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because they're talking about the life of the sun. The ancient peoples, like us today, we draw a circle, a round circle, and we divide it into 4 equal parts. And so now you have an equal arm cross inside of a circle. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, spring, summer, autumn, winter. There are a lot of symbolism in the Bible that we have misunderstood and mistaken. The whole idea is the 4 lodging places of the sun gives us our 4 seasons of the year. You will find the equal arm cross all over the world. Every race and creed and color has the same symbol for the ancient sun. The Nordics had the symbol, the Vikings kept the symbol, ancient France used the symbol. The symbol was on rocks and carvings and paintings. Even in India, you have the equal arm cross. The Celtic and the Celtic Druids in Europe and England and Ireland had an equal arm cross. Native Americans used it, Central America, and especially in Mayan and Inca and some of the ancient religions in South America have used the equal arm cross. So it became known all around the world that the equal arm cross within a circle represented the old 5,000-year-old petroglyph concept of the sun. Today people see it everywhere, and so it has become not really important because it's just a general symbol that people realize is a cross. Here is a picture of the ancient Nordic peoples that were preparing for what we would call today the Easter sunrise service. Here the ancient peoples in Europe realized that the sun was coming back to the northern hemisphere, and it would bring with it the warmth, the food, and life. And so they all gathered with their sun symbol to welcome back the sun that had died in winter and was coming back to the northern hemisphere. It became known as what we call today Easter. The circle on the cross is not a man dying on a cross. It's the sun on the north, east, west, and southern parts of the earth. The idea being, of course, is that when the sun dies in winter, and then when it is reborn on December 25th, the sun actually begins to move northward. And when it does, that tells the world that the sun is now coming back to the northern hemisphere, bringing back the sun to us in the northern hemisphere. Because for us in the northern hemisphere, the sun was dead to us because it was in the southern hemisphere. But now it's being born again and coming back to the northern hemisphere. That's the whole story in itself, is the vision of the sun going southward, dying on the cross, and then being reborn on December 25th when it moves 1 degree northward, and now is coming back and sort of springing back to life. And so in the spring, we call it springing back to life. Well, you will have the symbol everywhere, and even the European agency for the euro uses the same equal arm cross to represent the new euro establishment. You will always find in royalty throughout the world, royalty and governments always use this equal arm cross. The Nazis used it. Even in the parade of the Nazis used the swastika, which is a symbol of the sun also. But you will see also that they are using the equal arm cross. Coptic Christians, even the kings and rulers like the emperors of Europe, always had the equal arm cross on their staff, equal arm cross with the sun god in churches. In September, mid-September, around the world, Christians will gather in schools and universities to worship their God Jesus, who died on a cross. And when they call this ritual, see you at the pole. See you at the pole means that Christians will gather around the flagpole at their colleges and schools to venerate and to worship Jesus, God's Son, the light of the world. Well, of course, the sun is the light of the world. But here are Christians gathering to worship Jesus, never realizing that they are actually meeting around a very ancient symbol of the old petroglyph cross. That this symbol of an equal arm cross within the circle represents an old ancient idea of how to picture the sun. And it's really extraordinary to notice that all churches use that same symbol. And all over the world, people do not realize that this cross that they think represents Christianity is actually over 5,000 years old. It's an ancient, prehistoric symbol of the sun. Jesus has always represented the sun, the S-U-N, not S-O-N. The etymology of the word for the sun. You see that sun can be S-U-N or S-O-N, and depending on how it's used. S-O-N and S-U-N are used interchangeably in Christianity. And illustrations in the Christian church, you will see they're all actually a round, glowing sun. Not a young child or a baby or a man, but the S-U-N. There's two words, S-U-N and S-O-N, but the Christianity and Judaism are based on the worship of the S-U-N, not S-O-N. That's a misunderstanding. That misunderstanding is part of the history of the English language. Because if you go back into the King's Old English, you go back into the history of the English language, there is a phenomena which in English class you will learn is called the lazy O. The lazy O is a phenomena in English which means that translators always translated sun, S-O-N and S-U-N, all in the same sentence. And so it became known as the lazy O. They were talking about the S-U-N, but they used S-O-N because they were lazy. They just used either one. The mother of Jesus is Mary, which is actually Mari, M-A-R-I, not M-A-R-Y. Mari means pure. And therefore the mother of Jesus is a virgin, or Virgo. One of the 12 signs of the zodiac is a Virgo, the virgin. So here is Mary, or Mary, the virgin, Virgo, holding the baby Jesus, or God's Son, the light of the world. Today we still have Jesus as God's Son in the heavens, and he became now a great sun god. But the question you need to ask yourself is, who owns the sun? We assume that the sun must be owned by someone. Well, mankind doesn't own the sun. If anything, you would say maybe God owns the sun. So if God owns the sun, then it's God's Son, and he's the light of the world. Of course the sun is the light of the world. Looking at the communion host, the Catholic communion host, you will see it always looks like the old ancient petroglyph sun. You see that the sun and Jesus' hand represents the S-U-N. The Holy Eucharist represents the sun. This is why the priest in the church on Sundays will raise the sun. They will raise it. And why? Because that's what the sun does. It rises. So the sun rises. This is why we have the symbols on the host in the Catholic Church. It is always the old petroglyph sun. Jesus means God is with us. And you will see the priest is representing Jesus. How? As a sun. All of this goes back many, many thousands and thousands of years before Christianity ever existed. And it has nothing to do with Christianity at all. It has to do with exactly what it's showing, sun worship. And today we're still doing the same thing. We're worshiping the sun. And you will see the sun is prominent in all of Catholicism. Everywhere you look at Catholicism are worshipers of the sun. Now here we have a picture of Jesus giving to the children a part of his body. And what is he giving them? A little round sun disc. We're told that we should all take part of his body at the first communion. In that communion in the Catholic Church, you're taking part of God's Son's body. The whole idea is very obvious what's being talked about here. We're just talking about sun worship. The idea that the Son dies on a cross goes back to the old petroglyph cross, and so that's where we see it now all over the world, all Christianity. You'll see the Son is always dying on the cross, because in the southern constellation, when you go down south, when the sun reaches the lowest part in the sky in southern hemisphere, there is a constellation of stars that look just exactly like a cross. And so we say the sun, when it dies in December, it goes down and dies on the cross. The cross is called the Southern Cross. When he was dead, but now he's coming back to the northern hemisphere because he promised he would return. And he is returning again in the spring. Solar symbolism of the sun going southward each day until it finally reaches December 22nd, when it's its lowest point in the southern sky. It's down south now. It's gone south. But on December 22nd, the sun goes as far in the south as it's going to go, and it stops going southward on December 22nd. It doesn't go any further southward. Then on the 23rd and 24th, it rises on the same degree. And therefore, for 3 days, it doesn't move at all, stays in that same degree. So we say, and the ancient people said, that Jesus, or God's Son, died for 3 days. Why? Because it was moving every day, and now it's not moving for 3 days. So for 3 days, the sun was dead, and on December 25th, the sun moves 1 degree northward, which indicates, and even the United States Navy will show you on their instruments, that it indicates the sun is now alive again. He's born again. Now he's going to work his way back to the northern hemisphere, because he said, God's Son said, I will return. Well, he does. He returns every year. So what do you see? Do you see a man on this cross? Do you see a man dying on the cross? No. This is what is actually meant by dying on the cross. It's the sun. During the summer, when the sun is in the northern hemisphere, it is in the constellation of Leo, so he is the lion of the tribe of Judah. And then when he dies in Capricorn, down south when he goes south. And so now he dies in the winter. And then he comes back and springs back to life. And when he comes back to the northern hemisphere, we call it spring. But when it crosses the equator, the sun will have to cross the equator, coming back to us in the north. When it crosses the equator, it is said to have passed over the equator. So in the Hebrew religion, when the sun passes over coming back to the northern hemisphere, they call that celebration the Passover. But for Christians, they're worshiping the sun also as it passes over, but they refer to it as the resurrection. The God's Son has been resurrected. He's come back. It doesn't matter how you say it, a resurrection or a Passover. It just means the sun is coming back to us in the northern hemisphere.